I still remember the exact moment my life shattered into pieces, though to the rest of the world it was just an ordinary morning. I was standing by the sink, sleeves rolled up, drying my hands on an old apron that smelled faintly of soap and tomatoes, when the landline rang. I thought nothing of it. My house is filled with the quiet sounds of daily life: the creak of stairs, the trickle of water upstairs, where my daughter-in-law said she was showering, the faint memory of laughter from my grandson rushing to the bus earlier that morning. Everything seemed peaceful, safe, predictable. But one phone call was enough to turn my safe little world into a maze of shadows and doubt. The voice on the other end was my younger son, Ivan. At 30 years old, he was a co-pilot, a boy who once built paper planes in our yard, now soaring across continents. His voice has always been like a lifeline to me, cheerful, warm, steady. But that day, after a few ordinary pleasantries, his tone shifted into something that chilled me. "Mom," he whispered, "something really strange is happening." "I just saw my sister-in-law." I laughed nervously, wiping the last of the water from my hands. "Of course, honey. She's here upstairs taking a shower. I just heard her." But his next words made the receiver slip in my damp hand. "No, Mom, that's impossible. I have her passport in my hand. She just boarded my flight to France. She's sitting in first class." I'm looking right at her. The world tilted around me. I clutched the edge of the counter, staring toward the ceiling where water still hummed in the pipes. My daughter-in-law Araceli had spoken to me less than 10 minutes ago. She was real. Her soft voice had drifted down the stairs. And yet Ivan's voice was insistent, sharp with disbelief. My heart began to pound so loud I thought Araceli might hear it through the walls. In that moment, I didn't know if I should trust the woman upstairs or my own son who had never lied to me. The sound of the shower stopped. The door creaked open. Araceli's voice floated down. "Mom, who is it?" I lied through trembling lips. "Just a friend, dear." But inside, I felt as if I had been stabbed in the chest. If she was here with me, then who was the woman my son swore he saw on the plane? And if she was truly on that flight to France, then who in God's name was standing in my house? From that morning on, every smile, every gesture, every detail about my daughter-in-law began to fracture in my mind. I noticed her hands, the way one day she wrote with her right hand, neat and steady, and the next she scrawled awkwardly with her left. I noticed her moods, some days sweet, singing Matthew to sleep, and others sharp, cruel, dismissive of the same boy she once cradled. I even noticed her clothes, leaving the house in one blouse, returning in another. I told myself I was overthinking, that grief and age were making me see ghosts. But then Matthew's innocent little voice struck harder than any suspicion. "Grandma, sometimes my mom hugs me really tight, and other times she doesn't even look at me." I began to write everything down in an old notebook: times, clothes, moods, words. The handwriting looked like my own descent into madness. Each entry was a question mark clawed into the page. Who was this woman I had lived with for years? Was she my beloved daughter-in-law, or a stranger who had slipped into our lives wearing her face? The weight of it grew, until one afternoon I couldn't bear it any longer. I followed her. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, kept a distance, and watched as she turned not toward the market, as she said, but into a shadowy alley behind the old neighborhood. My heart stopped as she disappeared into a crumbling wooden house. But when I returned home only minutes later, there she was in the kitchen. Different clothes, hair freshly combed, asking me what vegetables I wanted for dinner. That night, staring at my notebook under the dim lamp, I wrote words I didn't dare believe. Maybe they are not the same person. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two versions of her. One walking into that broken-down house, one standing in my kitchen, smiling sweetly at me. The tick of the clock on my nightstand was unbearable, louder with each second, as though it were counting down towards some revelation I wasn't prepared for. At dawn, I rose quietly, my bones aching from a restless night. I poured myself a cup of tea, but even its warmth couldn't still the tremor in my hands. I sat at the table staring at my notebook, at the jagged words I'd written in desperation. Maybe they are not the same person. The thought was insane. How could there be two? How could the same woman appear in two places at once? But deep inside, I knew something wasn't right. I needed proof. The next day, I told Araceli I wasn't feeling well and asked her to pick up medicine from the pharmacy. She agreed without hesitation, her smile tender, her voice gentle. I watched her leave her bag slung over her shoulder, her footsteps steady. I waited 5 minutes before throwing on my coat and following at a distance. Sure enough, she didn't go to the pharmacy. She walked briskly, as if she had a purpose, slipping once again into that same alley, into that same wooden house with its peeling paint and sagging roof. My heart hammered in my chest. My feet refused to carry me closer, so I stood across the street, hidden behind a half-broken fence. Minutes later, the door opened again, and she came out. But something was different. Her blouse was no longer white, but red. Her hair was pulled back when earlier it had flowed loosely. Her steps were hurried, eyes darting as if she feared being followed. I rushed home before she could catch me trailing her. When she arrived later that afternoon, carrying groceries and humming softly as though nothing had happened, I felt the room spin. That evening, while she helped Matthew with his homework, I pulled Ivan into a call again. He was in his hotel room, exhausted from a long flight. I told him everything, how she had been in my house when he swore she was on his plane, how I'd seen her disappear into that old house, how she'd returned looking entirely different. His silence was heavy. Finally he said, "Mom, are you suggesting there are two of them?" The words chilled me to the bone. To hear my own son speak, the thought I'd been terrified to admit out loud made it real. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, Ivan, I think there are two." From that moment, I became obsessed with finding the truth. Days turned into weeks, and the more I watched her, the clearer the differences became. One of them, the one who lived in my house, was kind, gentle, motherly with Matthew. The other, the one I saw in that alley, seemed colder, sharper, with eyes that scanned every corner like a predator. One day, while sorting laundry, I found a blouse with a tag I had never seen before. Cheap fabric, a brand not sold anywhere in town. It smelled faintly of cigarettes, though my daughter-in-law never smoked. The pieces didn't fit, but the picture forming in my mind was terrifying. And then came the night of the family dinner. My elder son had planned to come home, and Araceli prepared the table with unusual energy. She laughed as she seasoned the meat, but her laughter sounded forced. Midway through the meal, she excused herself, saying she'd forgotten dessert. I thought nothing of it until 10 minutes later, I heard the door creak open again. Only it wasn't her walking back in with dessert. It was her, and yet not her. Same face, same build, but different clothes. Two identical women stood in my house that night. One froze in the doorway when she saw me. The other's face drained of color, her fork clattering to the plate. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Matthew, in his innocent voice, said, "Mommy, why are there two of you?" The room exploded with chaos. Chairs scraped the floor. My elder son knocked his glass over, and tea bled across the tablecloth like a wound. Matthew began to cry, small, hiccuping sobs that made my heart split open. The two women stared at each other with the hollow shock of mirrors, one in a blue cardigan, cheeks pink from the kitchen heat, the other in a leather jacket, hair tighter, eyes colder. For a long breath, I felt like I was the one who was split in two, a mother-in-law in two realities at once. The one in the cardigan, the one who had tucked Matthew into bed 100 times, spoke first, voice shaking. "Leave," she whispered to her double. "Please." The other smiled without warmth. "We need to talk," she said, and every instinct in me screamed that the "we" did not include me or my sons, or the child whose fingers clutched mine like an anchor. I stood, gathering Matthew into my arms. "Both of you," I said, amazed at the steel in my own voice. "We will talk. But not in front of my grandson." I sent my elder son to take Matthew upstairs. The house stilled around the sound of my heartbeat. We moved to the small sitting room, me and the two faces of one woman. The cardigan one sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tight. The leather jacket one remained standing, weight balanced like someone watching for exits. I felt like I needed air, but if I moved, I would miss something that could change our lives forever. "Start," I said, "one of you. Tell me who you are." Cardigan swallowed. "I am Araceli," she said, "your son's wife." Leather's mouth twitched. You are Araceli, she said with a kind of mocking pity. And I am Amara. She let the name fall like a stone into a well, her twin. A twin! The words slid across my skin like ice. Memories flickered as if they'd been waiting to surface, whispered phone calls that ended when I entered the room. A photograph in Araceli's box that had always been turned face down. The way she once said we when she meant I, and corrected herself too quickly. The cardigan woman Araceli blinked back tears. I never told you because I was ashamed, she said. We came from nothing. Our mother. She chose men who chose drinking over food. I escaped. She didn't. She looked at her sister. You didn't. Amara's smile sharpened. I survived, she said. Don't rewrite it. So you've been switching places, I said, hearing my voice from far away. That day my younger son called from the airplane he saw you, Amara, and you were here, Araceli. Silence was its own confession. Why I pushed. Why would you do this to my family, to my grandson? Araceli twisted the hem of her cardigan. At first it was small things. When I had migraines, Amara would cover a late shift or pick Matthew up from school so I could sleep. I thought, she choked on the words, I thought it would help. No one would notice two sisters swapping errands. And then I asked, though the answer was already forming in the tight line of Amara's mouth. Amara's gaze cut to me like a blade. And then I learned your family had resources, she said softly. A pilot's son. A home owned outright. A retirement account you never mention. She tilted her head. Do you know what we grew up eating? Do you know what it's like to choose between hunger and bruises? Don't lecture me about loyalty when loyalty never bought me bread. The room felt smaller. Araceli flinched. It was never supposed to be about money, she whispered. No, Amara snapped. It was supposed to be about belonging. But your brand of belonging meant I stayed invisible while you wore the ring. Her eyes flicked to me. So I tested boundaries. A dinner here, a weekend there. Passports are easy when you've shared a face since birth. My stomach turned. The flights, the alley, the cheap blouse that smelled of cigarettes. My notebook had been tracking not madness but migration, one woman in, one woman out. I thought of calling Ivan, of dialing the police, of locking the door. But there was a child asleep upstairs and two women before me who could burn down a world with what they knew. Whatever this is, it ends now, I said, standing because my legs needed to remember their strength. My son deserves the truth. If you won't tell him, I will. Araceli's eyes brimmed. Please, she said, voice paper thin. Give me a day, I'll tell him. Myself. Amara laughed softly. You'll tell him that you let me be the wife when it suited you. That Matthew sometimes called me Mom, and you didn't correct him because you were so tired you couldn't stand. He will not forgive you. She smiled like a wound. But he might forgive me. I saw it then, the plan coiling behind her eyes. Not theft alone, but replacement. Erase a wife by wearing her face long enough. Slip into a life like a borrowed coat, and then claim you were cold first. You won't take my family, I said. Not by hunger, not by pity, not by rage, not by your wounds. Araceli stared at me, eyes pleading. I will fix it, she whispered. I will choose. I will end this. A sound from the hall. My elder son returned, jaw set. He'd been listening. I knew that particular shape his mouth took when truth swallowed him harder than pride. Matthew's asleep, he said quietly to me, then to them, and you both need to leave. Amara's gaze flicked between us. You'll hear from me, she said, and the words were not a promise, but a threat. She moved to the door but paused, eyes on Araceli. Tick-tock, sister. Then she was gone like a storm that takes the roof but leaves the house standing just long enough to hope. That night I slept in the chair outside Matthew's room, the hallway lamp casting a gentle pool of light I could anchor my breathing to. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I woke to find Araceli sitting on the floor beside me, her head against the wall, her hands cradling a photo of her and Amara at 8 years old. Two gap-toothed girls in matching dresses grinning at a cake they probably couldn't afford. She didn't see me watching, and in that unguarded second, I met not the wife who had deceived us, but the child who had learned to keep secrets so she could keep love. At dawn, she rose and made a choice. I'll tell him tonight, she said, voice worn but steady. Everything. I'll ask for forgiveness and accept whatever comes. I nodded, though fear ratcheted my ribs tight. And Amara, she looked past me out the window where morning brushed the world with pale light. Amara doesn't accept endings, she said. She writes her own. By afternoon, the house felt like a stage rigged for collapse. I baked a cake not because anyone was hungry, but because the rituals of butter and sugar sometimes hold me together. My elder son came home early, his phone blinking with messages from Ivan, who had just landed again and wanted answers. I could feel the hour approaching like thunder you sense in your teeth before the sky admits it. Just before sunset, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was no one on the step, only a small envelope resting on the mat. Inside, a single key glinted, and a note written in sharp, unfamiliar letters. Come alone. Bring the boy if you want him back. An address. The old wooden house. I looked up and the world tilted. Matthew's bedroom was open. His bed was empty. My breath left my body like a door slamming in a storm. From somewhere down the block, a car engine turned over and faded. Araceli stood in the hallway, face white as paper. She wouldn't, she whispered. She wouldn't. But the terror in her eyes said she knew exactly what her sister would do when cornered. I clutched the key until its teeth bit my palm and tasted like metal and fate. Call Ivan, I told my elder son. Tell him everything. Tell him to stay on the line. I slipped the note into my pocket and felt my voice settle into a steadiness I didn't entirely recognize. I'm going to get my grandson. Araceli grabbed my arm. I'm coming. I know, I said. Because whatever else she had been, she was still Matthew's mother, and I was still the woman who had raised sons in storms. We stepped into the bruised light of evening toward the address that had tethered every lie to its anchor. Behind us, the house exhaled like a story that knew the next chapter would change everything. The sky was streaked with bruised purples and bleeding oranges as we drove toward the old wooden house. My elder son was behind the wheel. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Beside me, Araceli twisted her hands together until her knuckles whitened. I clutched the envelope in my lap, the key, and note rattling inside like bones. Every bump in the road jolted me deeper into dread. When we turned onto the alley, the house loomed like a carcass of rotting wood and broken windows. I felt Matthew's absence in my bones, a hollow ache that made breathing an effort. The curtains moved slightly, though no breeze touched us. My son killed the engine. Silence pressed around us, heavy and suffocating. I'll go first, he said, but I shook my head. This is between mothers, I told him quietly. If something happens, you protect your brother over the phone. Keep the line open to Ivan. Araceli's eyes brimmed with tears, but she straightened her spine. We stepped out together. The house creaked, as if it knew our weight before our feet touched the porch. I fit the key into the lock. It turned too easily. Inside, the air was damp with mold and smoke. A single bulb flickered overhead. And there, on a tattered sofa, sat Amara. Matthew was curled against her side, fast asleep, clutching his toy plane. The sight of my grandson safe made my knees weak, but Amara's smile curdled any relief. Welcome, she said, her voice syrupy with menace. The family reunion begins. Araceli moved toward Matthew, but Amara raised a hand. Not yet. We'll talk first. What do you want? I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was galloping. Her eyes gleamed. What I've always wanted. A life that wasn't stolen from me. A family, respect, and why shouldn't I have it? I wore her face better than she did. I fed her child, kept her husband's house. Who can say I'm less a mother than she is? Araceli shook, tears slipping down her cheeks. You're my sister, she whispered. You could have had a place with us. You didn't need to steal mine. Amara's laugh was jagged. A place at the table while you feasted, no. I wanted the whole table, and I nearly had it until her gaze snapped to me, kept scratching at shadows. I took a step closer. This isn't about me, or even her. This is about Matthew. He's a child. He deserves a mother who won't trade him for vengeance. Something flickered in her eyes, then pain maybe, or memory, but she masked it quickly. Children adapt, she said flatly, just as we did. My elder son's voice crackled through the phone in my pocket, reminding me Ivan was still on the line. I prayed silently that police were already on their way. I lifted my hands slowly, palms open. Amara, listen. If you keep him, you'll destroy him. You'll destroy yourself. Don't let the darkness you grew up in claim another child. Her jaw worked. For a heartbeat, silence pressed like the walls themselves were listening. Then Matthew stirred, his little voice breaking the tension. Grandma, he mumbled, eyes half open. I want to go home. That single word home split the room in two. Araceli lunged, scooping him up before Amara could react. The boy clung to her neck, whimpering, and she sobbed into his hair. Amara froze her fists, trembling at her sides. Then she let out a scream, raw and guttural, slamming her hand against the wall. You'll regret this, she spat before bolting toward the back door. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. She glanced at me, her face contorted with fury and grief. For a second I thought she might charge us, but then she disappeared into the night. The officers swarmed minutes later, guiding us out, wrapping blankets around our shoulders as if warmth could fix fractures in the soul. Araceli wouldn't let go of Matthew. My elder son wrapped his arms around both of them. I stood in the chill air, staring down the alley where Amara had vanished, knowing she was out there carrying her rage like a torch. Back at the safe house, Ivan's voice came through on speakerphone. He was shaking through miles away. She'll come back, Mom. You know she will. I nodded slowly. Yes, but so will we. And next time we'll be ready. That night, when the others finally slept, I sat awake by the window. The moon cast silver across the street, shadows stretching long. My hands trembled as I wrote the last line in my notebook. There were two, and we survived the night. But survival is not the same as peace. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest, because I knew the story wasn't over. Amara had walked into the darkness, but darkness always finds its way back to the door. The police searched for Amara for weeks. Flyers with her face, Araceli's face, hung on lampposts and bulletin boards. But it was useless. She was a shadow who had learned how to wear the daylight. She could be anyone, slip into any crowd. That was the most frightening part. How do you fight someone who looks exactly like the woman you sit across from at breakfast? At first, we tried to return to routine. Araceli walked Matthew to school, held his small hand in hers, kissed the top of his head like she was trying to press her love deep into his bones. My elder son buried himself in work, but at night he lay awake staring at the ceiling. And me? I became a sentinel, every creak in the house, sharpening my nerves, every knock on the door making my chest seize. One evening, weeks after the alley incident, I found Araceli in the kitchen staring at a pan of boiling water, her hands shaking. I keep seeing her, she whispered, in shop windows and reflections. Sometimes I don't even know if it's me looking back. I placed my hand over hers. That's what she wants, to make you doubt yourself. But you are here. You are real. You are Matthew's mother. Her tears spilled silently. She'll never stop. She was right. It happened on a rainy night in November. I had just tucked Matthew into bed when the doorbell rang. My elder son opened it, and there was a package sitting on the step, no sender's name. Inside was a small velvet box. Nestled within was a silver bracelet, Araceli's one she'd lost months earlier. Alongside it lay a folded note. Still family. Still waiting. The chill that swept through me was bone deep. She wasn't gone. She was circling. That night, I told Araceli and my sons that we could no longer live in half-truths. We had to take back the narrative before Amara rewrote it for us. We went to the police again this time, laying everything bare, every detail of the twin deception, every sighting, every threat. It wasn't easy. Araceli wept as she admitted how long she had let her sister slip in and out of their lives, but the truth once spoken had its own power. The investigation widened. Detectives connected Amara to fraudulent accounts, to forged signatures, to attempts at transferring property into false names. She hadn't just wanted to take Araceli's place, she had wanted to consume the life entirely. Then came the trial. Walking into that courtroom felt like walking into a nightmare made flesh. Across the aisle sat Amara, shackled but defiant, her eyes never leaving Araceli. The resemblance between them was unbearable. Same cheekbones, same lips, but one face hardened by bitterness, the other softened by grief. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, the identity swaps, the attempted abduction, the fraud. Witnesses spoke neighbors who'd seen Araceli in two places at once, Matthew's teacher who noticed inconsistent behaviors. Then it was my turn to testify. I stood palms sweating and told the jury what I had lived the phone call from Ivan, the two women in my dining room the night Matthew vanished. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. Because silence had almost destroyed us once before. Not again. When it was Araceli's turn, she broke down. "She is my sister," she said through tears. "We shared a womb, a childhood, 1,000 secrets. But family doesn't mean turning a blind eye to harm. Family doesn't mean letting her steal my child's safety." Amara only laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "You think he's safer with you?" she sneered. "You think love makes you stronger? Love made you weak enough to let me in?" The judge banged his gavel, demanding order, but her words clung to me. Because in a way she was right. Love had made us vulnerable. Love had been the door she walked through. But love was also the reason we had survived. When the verdict finally came guilty on all counts, the room exhaled as one. Amara's mask cracked, rage flashing before the guards pulled her away. Araceli collapsed against my elder son, sobbing. I closed my eyes, whispering a prayer of thanks, though my heart still ached. Because even with justice, wounds remain. That night back at home, I watched Matthew sleeping peacefully, his toy plane still clutched in his hand. I thought of the storm we had walked through, of the secrets that had nearly devoured us. And I thought of the lesson carved into my bones. Family is not about blood alone. Blood can betray, blood can wound. What matters is the choice to protect, to love, to fight for each other, even when the world splits in two. If my story touched you, if you've ever carried family secrets too heavy to bear, let this be a reminder. Speak them. Silence is a prison. Truth, even painful, is a key. So please like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, subscribe for more stories, and leave me a comment with the truths you've held in your heart. Because telling them might just set you free.